of that community and their community as well. Think about that shooting in Buffalo in the supermarket, right? That sent a chilling effect. That perpetrator targeted a supermarket that African Americans went to and shot people in that supermarket because of that. That's a chilling effect. Or when somebody got the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, that's sending a message, right? It makes people afraid to go and go to synagogue and practice. Or the Sikh shooting in Wisconsin, or the El Paso Walmart, right? It sends a chilling effect to the people with that characteristic and to the entire community. And I would say sometimes even the world. Remember the New Zealand, the mosque, the massacre that happened in New Zealand at the mosque? We all felt that. So because of that, Congress has decided to have enhanced penalties when it's this sort of crime. It's not just I shouldn't say just, but a crime. It's because of this characteristic. And it's intended, it sends a message, hate crimes. The perpetrator, they often literally write manifestos, right? Saying this is why I'm doing, like I want all of these people to get out of my neighborhood, to get out of this country, or whatever it is. So it's intended to frighten, and quite honestly, they're often more severe and more serious. And they tend, people who commit hate crimes often tend to repeat the hate crime, and they might target more, and they escalate. Yes, sir?
Yes, I've been conducting group discussions for 4 years. Can I just suggest something for everybody?
Yes.
You speak over there to her question. Don't speak to her. That's just a small chat. Speak to that person way back there, right? So that you're looking to get everybody to be able to hear that question, either from the panel or even questions. And stand up.
Okay.
Especially when you have a right here audience like we do.
And if anybody can't hear or needs a question repeated, please let us know. Okay, we want this to be accessible to everyone.
I'm going to go. They can raise their hand. I'll bring the mic to them.
Perfect. If you have a question, Jim can bring the mic to you.
Bring the mic up.
Okay. All right. So we already dabbled in this a little bit, but we can't talk about hate crimes unless we talk about the First Amendment, right? And so under the First Amendment of the Constitution, people have the right to express themselves, even if their message is very offensive and hateful. You have the right to do that in this country. You have the right to freely speak your mind, to have a free press, to petition the government, to exercise religion, to not exercise religion. Those are rights we all have under the First Amendment, right? But there is a line, and that is what we talked about, true threats earlier. And that's when speech is advocating or encouraging people to commit crimes and to to become violent. So then, depending on the circumstances, it may cross the line into hate crime. And hate crime legislation does cover true threats. I don't want to get into the nuances. It's a bit detailed and it depends. That's the law for you. But if somebody says something or communicates a message and it's scary, please report it. Okay? It might be protected speech, but we want to know and we want to be able to evaluate that. And what else is going on with this? Yep.
So what happens, my name's Pat, by the way, what happens when you've got an arm of the federal government, in this case very often the president or major elected leaders, describing one side of the political aisle as engaging in hate crime, when in fact there's no violence intended towards any individuals, there's no singling out of ethnic issues, there's certainly no religious bias, they're pointing out the behavior of the government. And so the problem is at what point in time does hate crime legislation empower a federal government to essentially politicize free speech like that? They're not interested in pointing out actual hate crimes, but they're interested in pointing out and demonizing a certain side of the political argument. In this case, very often the right. Now, it could be various aspects of the right. It could be the Trump right. It could be the centrist right. It could be the libertarian right.
So, did everybody hear the question? No. Oh, okay. Can we?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
And I think after this question, maybe we wait till the end of your presentation
Okay,
if you're
sorry.
comfortable. I know we have about an hour to get through, but I think it might be better if we let Amy get through her presentation, and then we do questions. So this will be the last question until Amy's done.
All right. So my question is this. Is this on, or it doesn't sound like it's on?
Thank you.
Is it on? Can people hear me okay? Sorry. Usually no one questions the tenor of my voice. Thank you. Thanks, Inspector. Thank you. So let me see if I can condense it. Right now, the term hate crime is used liberally, not in the political sense, but it cuts a wide swath. And the term hate crime has become weaponized by the Biden administration and a number of other political forces who seek to minimize or trivialize real concerns of Americans and in a sense, steer that into the area of what's considered hate. Now, I certainly don't support hate. I'm a libertarian, all right? We're actually a legitimately anti-war party. But at the same time, what they've done here is they've taken hate crime laws and broadened that to include speech that we disagree with.
Do you have a question that you?
Yeah, no, I'm setting up.
really need to
I
do
actually
that
do this for a
program.
living.
Thank you.
So the question is,
We only have a time.
at what point in time does hate crime enable a restriction of free speech when used as an all-inclusive umbrella for speech that we disagree with? Some would contend that's happening right now. Thank you.
Well, so thank you. So I think, so there is a lot of case law dividing between First Amendment protected speech and a true threat, where it's no longer covered under the First Amendment. There's a whole lot of case law. We have the law. The Congress has said this is what it is, and then we have to present it to a judge or a jury. And we don't. I understand your cult. It sounds like you have maybe a political.
Well, no, it's
Yeah.
real quick, and then, please, I
Yeah.
want you to continue. But real quick right now, the president,
It's okay. It's okay.
the president of the United States is using hate crime legislation, and we can't sue the president. We can't shut him up, but he can call me a hater, despite the fact that I'm actually a pacifist and anti-war.
That's not a threat,
Yeah.
though.
Well, I think.
Threat to me. My speech.
Okay.
So if I could, I think we're going to move on with the presentation, and we'll try to address some of these, and then even afterwards, if someone would like to meet on the side with Amy or whoever else, that'd be great. I know people are here to learn about the presentation, and so, Amy, please continue.
Okay, all right. So we do want to share, are there parents in the room? Grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles? So we do, and Brian probably, I don't know if Brian's going to talk about this actually, we haven't, but there are, internet organizations are recruiting teenagers. So if you find out that your teenager is on a website or an internet, or I don't know, a game or something, and there's hateful images and hateful speech, don't disregard it, okay? Address it. And I don't mean you have to, in another presentation, somebody said, do we have to call the FBI on my son? I'm like, no, you don't need to do that unless you think that it's elevating to that, but address it. What is going on? You know, what is happening here? Don't disregard it, please. Okay. All right, so there's, as I said, not everything elevates to the level of a hate crime. It's very specific, but there's also more general discrimination. And sometimes things come to me, and it might not be a hate crime, but it might be discrimination and something that we can address. Or a hate incident, which again is not prosecutable, but still important to know about because it could escalate into something else. So the difference, we're going to talk about the difference between them with some scenarios. So I'm going to read a scenario to you, and you can talk about whether you think it's a hate crime, a hate incident, or discrimination. Okay, so I'm going to read it out loud for those who can't see the screen. Oh, I think that's you. Okay, a trans woman takes an Uber to TF Green. As she enters the car, the driver says, "The app says I'm supposed to pick up a woman, not a crossdresser." When the passenger exits, the driver tells her, "You shouldn't be requesting any more rides from anybody unless you stop lying. You're no woman." Raise your hand if you think that's a hate crime. Okay. Hate incident? Discrimination? Okay, I'm going to change the facts a little bit, okay? So imagine that this passenger, as she was retrieving the luggage from her trunk at TF Green, the driver suddenly slams down the trunk, narrowly missing her hands. What do you think? Does that change things? Potentially, right? Potentially. It depends, right? It could be a threat, or it could be a coincidence, just bad timing. They weren't paying attention, they were on their phone. But you have the hateful comments, then you have that action. It starts to maybe look more like a hate crime. Okay. Now let's say the driver shows up to the origination, I guess the original spot, sees this woman, and refuses to pick her up, and says, no, that's not what the app says, and says, I don't know about you people, but I don't want to get HIV, not in my car. What do you think? Discrimination, right? And that would actually be discrimination under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Even if that person didn't have HIV, if they were perceived to have HIV because of their sexual orientation, that would be discrimination. So our office enforces the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. We would also encourage so you could call our office. What else could that person call? I can't hear anybody, but yeah. Uber, yeah, call the company, absolutely. Call the employer, let them know that it happened, right? That this happened to them. So again, not everything rises to the level of a hate crime, but it's still important to address it and to report it. Okay? Report or don't report? Report. Okay, here's another scenario. A group of men walk past the Jewish Community Center and shout out anti-Semitic comments. What do you think?
Incident.
Yep. As we said, people can exercise their right to use hateful language as long as it's not coupled with any other illegal actions. Now let's say the building the next morning is defaced with swastikas. Hate crime, right? We talked about that. Vandalism to religious property because of and you can say that it's because of the religious property, and I think a swastika on a Jewish community center is sufficiently correlated. That would be a hate crime. And again, if let's say the men refuse to let people pass into the entrance, that would also elevate into hate crime. Okay, and this is the last scenario I have. A 20-year-old Muslim woman wearing a hijab attends URI. She returns to her dorm room to see a note stuck to her door that says, "Your people don't belong here." Hate incident, right? There's no direct threat. It's hateful, it's mean, but it's not a threat. And there's no property damage. Now let's say the note says, threatens her. You better watch your back. If you don't leave, you better watch your back. Potentially hate crime, right? We would look to see, is this threat credible? Is it real? And is it imminent? And that would be the victim's religion and possibly her national origin. Now let's say she complains to her, what do they call it? RA, sorry, the dorm person. She complains about the note and they kind of shrug it off. Then it gets into discrimination, right? Schools have an obligation under Title IV of the Civil Rights Act to prevent racial harassment and to prevent religious harassment. And so then there might be an obligation of the school, once they become aware of students harassing other students or a student feeling scared, they have an obligation under federal law to protect and to address. Okay, the report is always the answer. All right, so moving on. So basically now that you have a better understanding of how to identify a hate crime, we're going to talk about what you should do when one occurs. So if something is in the moment, please call 911, right? Do not call the FBI in the moment. Call 911. You laugh, but you know what I mean? Like they are the immediate, they will dispatch to the most immediate responder. Call 911. You can worry about the hate crime, Amy's presentation later, right? After the emergency has been addressed. If you come across a flyer or something, take a picture of it, right? Like, memorialize it, because it's going to be taken down, or vandalism, hateful, a swastika painted somewhere. Take a picture of it and call 911. Get that immediate report. Now, I kept the language in this presentation very PG, but you need to report what you hear, and it's probably not going to be PG, right? You need to report what you hear, and don't tone it down. We're used to hearing it all, so don't worry about that. We like you to report to the FBI, but we also get reports from the local police departments. And then, if appropriate, you can look to us for additional support. If this is happening at a school, does the school need a training? Does the school need somebody, Dave, to come out and talk? If it's happening at an employment or a government or a municipality, it's something that we want to work with you to see if there's ways that we can help. Is there a marginalized group that's being targeted? We want to make sure that they have protections in place and that they feel safe. All right, so hate crimes are underreported. That has been, when people are polled about whether or not they've experienced or witnessed a hate crime and then whether or not they've reported it, I think the statistics have shown that your people are less likely to report a hate crime than they are to report a non-hate crime, a crime that's not motivated by a characteristic. And why do you think that is? Fear? Fear of retaliation? Yep. Anybody else? Thoughts? Embarrassment? Absolutely. If they feel, victimized or targeted or marginalized. And often if you're in a protected group, that's a feeling you've been carrying with you, right, for a long time, that you maybe experienced as a child in the school system or, in different parts or in your employment or in your housing. And the last thing you want to do is kind of deal with law enforcement. But there's some other reasons why people probably don't report. Yep?
A sense that it won't be addressed.
A sense that it won't be addressed. And I think that's probably a big one. A sense that, what's the point? Right? What is the point? And so we're here to tell you that it is helpful. It really is. This information is helpful to us because when this behavior doesn't go addressed and we're not aware of it and something does happen later, we don't know. Was it motivated by hate? Or was this just a random isolated incident? So it's very helpful for us to understand and then to take kind of prevention efforts to address what's going on. Whether it's addressing it with a perpetrator, which again, it might not be a prosecutable crime, or addressing it and addressing a safety plan with the victim to make sure that they feel safe, that they feel comfortable in their place of employment or wherever it has happened in the school system. Okay. So I think finally, this is probably more of the panel, but again, there's ways we can do to prevent this from happening at all, which is I think we would all like to do. So we do have a partnership. Department of Homeland Security has a protective security advisor for Rhode Island, Eric Ullman. I don't know if any of you have met him before, but he will go out and do very comprehensive, free of cost assessments of buildings to make sure the buildings themselves are safe for the people within those buildings. So are there cameras where they should be? Do they work? Do they, everything. The windows, the doors. And that I would absolutely recommend. So if anybody is interested in that for their congregation, for wherever their space is, please let me know and I can certainly link you up with Eric. He's done public libraries, he's done schools, he's done assisted living facilities, he's done mosques, he's done a lot of buildings. And he's quite good and he's free.
And Amy, just so everybody knows,
Yeah.
your information, contact information, and Pepper from the FBI is in everybody's folder. So just so you know that information's in there.
Okay, and then this is just, we want you to, this is not my PowerPoint, but this is, we want open communication, we want relationships, developing awareness, and of course our responsibility. If you report, we will respond. You have to understand that we can't prosecute everything that comes our way, and there's reasons for that. And you may agree or disagree with those reasons, but we have to kind of follow, the laws that are given to us, and we have to kind of evaluate the credibility and the strength of the case. But we are very committed, and we want more people to report what's happening. Yes, sir.
So you've mentioned several times that it's important for you to be informed.
Yes.
So now we are informed that several flyers have been put on people's property. So having that information, what can you do about it?
So we're aware of that. We're aware of the flyering, and we are assessing it. So again, there's First Amendment right to flyer certain things, but if we look at, is it targeting a certain neighborhood because of the characteristic of the neighborhood?
Which it has.
So we're happy to talk to you. We are aware. I know that we've been having talks with the FBI about the flyering. So I'm happy to talk to you on the side about it.
I mean, in general,
Yeah.
as we're talking, what can be done about it? And if not, why are you talking about this in the first place?
So it can potentially be prosecuted, and in some cases the flyering crosses state lines. We've seen this. It's actually people traveling to Rhode Island to do that, or taking the same flyers and going. We're so small, going to Massachusetts and Connecticut. So there are things to be done. We want to make sure when we bring a federal case that we have the case, we have the strength of the case. It is not falling on deaf ears, and it's not that we're just aware of it and we're like, that's too bad. We are taking it all, and we are kind of assessing, again, the credibility, the threat. Does it fall under the laws? Some of which have limitations, the laws. But we are aware of the flyering. But should you see new flyering, please don't assume that we're aware of it, okay? Because we get it through individuals.
I mean, this has been going on for about a year and a half in the state.
I know, and there's different, it's also difficult because there's different, from my understanding, different people doing the flyering. And different groups doing the flyering.
And I think what's important here is, Rabbi Adler, when flyering happens, to contact the law enforcement, which your group does, and then it's investigated fully by law enforcement, and then determinations are made if criminal charges exist. So if you didn't know to report, that's what this is about. We need to report everything. And, unfortunately, the law is a law, and as you know better than anybody else, sometimes things can't be done, sometimes things can't be done. But it's important that it gets investigated fully, which I think your case is happening.
And unfortunately, I can't comment about ongoing investigations. So, okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. And then I'll get you next.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this presentation. One of the things that I am very, very concerned about is the rising aggression in schools towards Christians, white Christians. And I know they're not technically a protected class, but I have some real concerns around that because, I have a child at the high school. And I was wondering, I did file a complaint about some overt curriculum that is being used that actually strategizes with students on how to single out white Christian male supremacist or white Christian supremacist. And specifically, I'm concerned about this aggression and sort of hatred, overt hatred that is sanctioned by the schools against white Christians, and in particular white Christian male students. So I know they're not protected class, but how could some, a complaint like that or a concern like that be dealt with? And I actually have examples of the posters and curriculum and the curriculum platform that exists in all Rhode Island schools, specifically in North Kingstown. I did file a complaint, and it was ignored. So how would my concern over my son or daughter and aggression towards my son and daughter or any white Christian child, how are those complaints dealt with?
Thank you for your question. So I do want to say that white is a protected category under race, males are protected under gender, and Christian is protected under religion. So it doesn't, whether it's white, black, Hispanic, that's protected. Supremacist, not a protected category. And I don't.
So, but conflating the two is suggesting that white males are supremacists, and that it could be potentially dangerous, because I think we all agree that, you know, any sort of white supremacy or any of that hateful speech can be harmful. But when you conflate the two words, Christian and supremacy, you know, in a school, it's suggesting that we should be afraid of Christians, and specifically white Christians. So that could potentially lead to harm, and has in fact led to harm, you know, in my own personal experience. So why, and you know, why is a complaint like that ignored?
I can't speak to your complaint, and to be honest, it's actually not familiar to me, so I don't. Generally for education, our Department of Education is our federal partner, and they have an Office of Civil Rights. Each federal agency, for the most part, has an Office of Civil Rights, so that would be a complaint that would be, if we received it, would be referred. If there's yeah, we would refer it, absolutely. I can't speak what they would do, obviously. I have no control over that. But that would be the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, where that would be kind of the appropriate entity to kind of evaluate the complaint. If somebody is facing, you know, threats, is to the point where they're scared to go to school because of specific threats. Again, we talked about, you know, specific threat to inflict harm on a specific individual. That's where we would get involved.
These are children. And
oh no, I understand that. So I would encourage you, and I can give you their contact information, the Office of Civil Rights. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. And then, sorry, I forgot about him. But yes, okay.
Quick question.
Yes.
If I file a complaint with the police department about what I believe is a hate crime, are the police mandated to then report it to the FBI?
I don't know, actually, if there's a mandate. There's certainly a practice. Did any of the law enforcement in the back of the room know, or Dave, do you know?
I'm not sure.
I don't know that there's a mandate. I do know with the 2021, the new legislation in 2021 around the COVID, it did kind of put more of a burden on local law enforcement to do online reporting. The problem that we sometimes find is sometimes local law enforcement, sometimes they record it as a hate crime, sometimes not. I know that our agent, Pepper, who Dave referred to earlier, and I think her contact information is in there. She's the civil rights FBI agent for Rhode Island. She's in regular contact with with the police departments in Rhode Island. But if you want to be 100% sure that it goes, you know, make the call yourself to Pepper or to 1-800-CALL-FBI and say this is Rhode Island, and that way you're 100% sure that the dots are connected. I don't want to say that it's automatic, because I'm honestly not sure if it is. I think it probably is not automatic. Yes, I'm so sorry.
That's fine. I just have one real quick question. Former DCF worker from the state of Connecticut, mandated reporting. I'm a little surprised that the police are not mandated to do a hate crime up to the FBI. I think that statute needs to be worked out. That's number one. Number two, as a member of the community who makes a report to you that is involved with open communication, do I hear back from you disposition of my referral or complaint in terms of was it accepted, was it followed up on, etc.?
I try to stay in contact with the people who do complaints. If we're investigating, I can't talk about it. And so that jeopardizes the integrity of the investigation. So that's a little difficult sometimes. And as you know, with government, everything takes a long time. So you might not get the immediate response. I do want to say that to the extent it's discrimination, contacting our office, filing a complaint with our office does not toll the statute of limitations. So if you wanted to kind of sue somebody privately, you should still go ahead and do that. Don't wait for the government to do it. But I do. Pepper and I, we answer our phones. I have my business card if anybody wants it. We are communicative, to the people who reach out to us. And if I can't tell you what's going on, I'll tell you that I can't tell you what's going on. And it's not because I'm ignoring you.
And Amy, if I could, all crimes are reported to the FBI, but I think the question was, if I report a crime, is it also brought to the local police, is it also investigated by the FBI? So no, that's not the case. So if a case comes into South Kingstown and they investigate it, and they run it by the Attorney General's or our office, and there's no crime there, they're not going to ask the FBI to investigate it.
Right.
If that clarifies your question. Yeah. But all crimes are reported through an index data sharing program. Just a
Yep.
If a crime is reported to the police, does it have to go into the paper? In the past, there was a burglary at my house, and I reported it to the police, and my address was put in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's still the case, and would that be true of a hate crime? Because that would be a deterrent for me.
I can understand that. I don't know that question in terms of local
So I think that's
practices.
A great question for our panel. We have 2 police chiefs and a captain. So that'd be a great question we could ask them.
I can tell you from our side of it, the federal side of it, we hold investigatory privilege near and dear. So, we have the balance of wanting to be a transparent government. So if somebody issues a FOIA request, but also we have investigatory privilege. So, we don't necessarily release the name of a complainant, right? We kind of assess things on a case-by-case basis, and it would have to come to us through FOIA. We're not going to the paper, when we receive complaints. But I don't know in terms of local practices, and that is a great question for the panel. Okay. I think I'm done here. Yeah, there's my contact information, which I believe is also in your folder, so feel free to reach out. If it's about an incident, I will probably have you talk to either Pepper or Tim, just because we kind of try to create a little bit of a barrier if I'm the one who's going to be prosecuting the case. There are investigators and agents working with our office. But thank you, everybody. Sounds like there's going to be a lot of healthy dialogue for the panel.
So we're going to take a quick 10-minute, 15-minute break, and then we'll come back in and you'll hear from Brian Pyrus. He has a quick 15-minute overview, and then we'll set our panel in place. So thank you.